Some footage isn't banned because it's fake, it's avoided because it asks questions that no one can answer clearly. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and because it exposes moments where reality slips just enough to make people uncomfortable. Well, these are real cases where the footage exists, the evidence is documented, and the explanations never fully satisfy. The elevator footage that never should have been released. So the doors open, a young woman steps inside. Within seconds, everything feels off. She presses multiple buttons like she's in a rush, then stops. She peeks out into the hallway, steps back in, steps out again. Her body language shifts from casual to alarmed in seconds, as if someone just outside the frame is controlling the space. Now, this is the final known footage of Elisa Lam, in case it wasn't obvious, and unless you've been living under a rock or are not into true crime at all, there's simply no way you haven't heard of this case. Now, captured by a hotel elevator camera, the video shows her alone, yet behaving as if she isn't. She gestures strangely, hides in the corner, peers into empty space, and at one point seems to actually talk or react to something that never appears on camera. Weeks later, her body was discovered inside a rooftop water tank. The footage became public before answers did, and once it spread, it was impossible to contain. Viewers noticed missing timestamps, cuts in the clips that weren't explained, moments that felt slowed, altered, or incomplete. Authorities later stated, her passing was, accidental. Of course, mental health was cited and the case was officially closed. That's it, nothing further. But the footage itself refuses to cooperate with that kind of, simplicity. Hotel guests complained of black water, roof access details didn't add up to many investigators, and the elevator video, stripped of context, left behind one lasting question. Why does fear show up before danger is ever confirmed? So this footage remains one of the most dissected pieces of surveillance video ever released, not because of what it shows, but because of what it doesn't. The broadcast hijack that still has no culprit. Now, if you were watching television that night, your screen didn't go dark, it looked straight back at you. A man wearing a rubber mask interrupted the broadcast. The image jittered, the audio was distorted, and suddenly someone who was never supposed to be there was staring directly into millions of homes. This is the Max Headroom broadcast hijacking, and this wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate. Twice, actually, in one night, two separate television stations were overtaken by an unknown individual using advanced signal intrusion. Now, the person appeared on screen, spoke nonsense, made obscene gestures, and performed a disturbing, almost ritualistic performance. No demands were made, no explanation was given. Broadcast engineers later admitted the skill required to pull this off in the 1980s was not amateur. The intruder had knowledge, equipment, and a lot of confidence. Now, what haunts viewers today isn't the content, it's the implication. Someone slipped into a closed system, controlled it, and left without consequence. The footage still exists, and watching it now feels less like a prank and more like someone proving how fragile reality really is. The film that should have changed history, but vanished. So she's standing closer than almost anyone else. The camera is raised, the shots ring out, and yet her footage has never been seen. In multiple frames from different angles, a woman wearing a headscarf, later dubbed the Babushka Lady, appears to be actively filming during the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. She doesn't flinch, she doesn't run, she keeps recording. Investigators confirm she existed. Witnesses confirm she had a camera, but the film itself just vanished. Years later, a woman claimed she was the Babushka Lady and said the footage was taken by authorities. Now, her story raised more questions than answers. I mean, because if that film surfaced, it could potentially confirm or destroy decades of speculation. Angles, timing, shot direction, the absence of that footage is one of the most haunting gaps in recorded history. Not because we don't know what happened, but because we know someone captured it and no one ever saw it again. The night an entire city filmed the same thing. This wasn't one witness, this wasn't one camera, one angle. Thousands of people looked up and saw the exact same thing. A massive formation of lights moved silently across the sky. Perfect spacing, no sound, no visible, protrusion, and people filmed from rooftops highways, backyards, and parking lots. Police officers reported it. Pilots saw it even. Some videos show a V-shaped structure kind of blocking out stars as it passed by. Others show glowing orbs hovering, then vanishing. This is the 1997 Phoenix Lights incident, in case, again, you know, my beautiful descriptions and depictions didn't tell you that already. Anyway, officials later offered explanations. Flares, misidentification, coincidence maybe, but the footage didn't match the story clearly or cleanly, and the timing didn't align. The movement didn't behave like flares, and the sheer number of recordings made dismissal impossible. Now, what makes this footage very unsettling is not what you believe it is, but that it's real. It's shared and documented by thousands, yet never fully ever resolved. The recordings that turned a house into a legend. Before the movies, before the books, before the myth, there were recordings, audio interviews, photographs, public statements captured on tape. After a brutal family assassination, a new family moved into the house and soon claimed something was very wrong. They described voices, cold rooms, physical sensations even, and events that escalated very quickly. As you probably have guessed, this is the 1974 DeFeo family story and the Lutz family story, or better known to all of us as the Amityville horror case. Now, their accounts were recorded, their statements published, their stories sold. Years later, parts of the narrative, unraveled. Some witnesses recanted, others doubled down, but the recordings remain, and they shaped how millions perceive fear inside a home. Even skeptics admit the material is very compelling, not because it proves the supernatural, but because it shows how easily belief can be recorded, replayed, and immortalized, and once fear is captured on tape, it doesn't fade. I mean, these cases, listen, they're not connected by monsters or conspiracies. They're connected by something far more disturbing. They show moments where footage exists, but clearly does not, and clarity doesn't either. And that's why they were buried, debated, dismissed, or simply quietly ignored, because sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what the footage shows, it's the fact that it's real and still unexplained, which is really scary. Skinwalker Ranch, the orbs that should not exist. The first thing you need to understand about Skinwalker Ranch is this: it isn't haunted, it's active. People don't just see things there, things, respond. Lights appear only when observed, shapes move only when cameras are rolling. And whatever is out there seems to know exactly where the cameras are. On multiple nights, investigators monitoring the ranch watched bright, glowing orbs appear in the sky, silent, motionless at first, then suddenly accelerate at impossible speeds. No engines, no sound, no flight pattern matching any known aircraft at all. But the truly disturbing part, while the orbs didn't behave randomly, they appeared after questions were asked or during moments of heightened tension, as if reacting, to the presence of people watching. Thermal cameras captured heat signatures with no physical source. Shapes appeared as dark voids in the thermal field, colder than the surrounding air, moving across open land, and then just vanishing instantly. In one recorded incident, an orb hovered above the ranch for several seconds before shooting straight upwards and disappearing, leaving no trail, no sound, no explanation. Radar picked up nothing. Drones sent to investigate lost signal mid-air. Longtime ranch workers reported seeing large animal-shaped figures watching from the tree line, shapes resembling wolves or dogs, but far too large and completely silent. When lights were turned on, the figures vanished. No tracks, no disturbed ground. This matters because skinwalkers in Navajo lore are often associated with orbs, shape-shifting forms, and intelligent observation, not mindless monsters, but, entities that watch and they wait and respond. And Skinwalker Ranch is one of the only places on Earth where this phenomena has been captured repeatedly on multiple types of cameras by different teams across decades. Whatever is out there, it knows it's being watched. The Sherman family, voices in the dark and animals that just vanish. Now, before Skinwalker Ranch became famous, before scientists arrived, before cameras covered every inch of land, a family lived there. And what they experienced was actually so disturbing, they eventually fled the property entirely. Shortly after moving in, the Shermans began losing livestock. Cows disappeared without a sound. Others were found deceased, surgically mutilated with organs removed so cleanly it looked intentional. There was no red liquid, no drag marks, no predator tracks. Now, one cow was found with its eye removed and tissue missing. Yucky, I know. Yuck. Yet the surrounding grass was untouched. Another had serious sections removed that veterinarians just couldn't explain. I mean, then came the sounds. At night, the family heard voices outside the house, not even in English, not any recognizable language, whispering just beyond the light. I mean, dogs reacted violently, barking and whining at empty fields. I mean, one night the family patriarch stepped outside with a flashlight after hearing movement near the barn. Now, he reported hearing footsteps circle him, slow, deliberate, while nothing appeared in the beam of light. Now, the footsteps stopped only when he returned indoors. Tracks were later found in the snow leading towards the house and then simply stopping as if whatever made them vanish just kind of mid-step. Now, over time, the family became convinced something was watching them, learning their routines, testing boundaries, observing how they reacted. Now, in Navajo belief, skinwalkers are not, chaotic. They're calculated. They study their targets like the Kardashians. The Shermans eventually abandoned the ranch, leaving behind animals, equipment, and a home they were just too afraid to sleep in. I mean, their testimony became one of the foundational cases that turned this property into a paranormal focal point, and what later investigators captured would only confirm their fears. The thermal figure that moved wrong. Now, during a night investigation at the ranch, a team set up thermal cameras to monitor a section of land where strange activity had been repeatedly reported. Nothing happened for hours. Then suddenly, a small humanoid-shaped figure appeared on thermal, darker than, the surrounding environment, colder than the air, moving across the screen in a very unnatural way. It didn't walk, it didn't crawl, it kind of hopped like a bunny. Now, the motion didn't match any known animal at the time. Not a deer, not a coyote, not a bunny, not a human. The body proportions were just wrong. I mean, the movement was wrong then in the middle of the frame. It just vanished. No fade, no exit. 1 second it's there, the next it just was not there. Investigators replayed the footage repeatedly, frame by frame, unable to identify what they were seeing. Later that night, a glowing white orb appeared on night vision footage, drifting silently through the same location, very slow, deliberate, as if retracing the figure's path. The desert investigation that turned into a massive hunt. Now, a paranormal investigation team traveled to a desert region long associated with skinwalker legends, a place locals avoid at night. Now, almost immediately, the atmosphere felt wrong. The air was unnaturally quiet. No insects. There was no wind. I mean, no distant animal sounds at all. As night fell, the team began hearing footsteps pacing them just outside their light radius. Now, cameras caught, shadows kind of moving between rocks, always staying just out of reach. But then came the sounds. Very low growls, heavy breathing, movement too large to be a small animal, but too fast to be a human. Now, at one point, a figure appeared briefly on camera. Tall, very thin, but also very wrong. Standing behind a rock formation, before ducking out of view. The team actually attempted to follow it. Brave, I know. Their cameras began malfunctioning, batteries drained rapidly, audio distorted. One investigator reported feeling disoriented and nauseous as if being watched intensely. They eventually realized something terrifying. Whatever was out there wasn't hiding. It was hurting them. The movements were calculated, forcing them away from certain areas and towards others. When they, retreated, they actively followed. Navajo Nation encounters. Now, this is too fast, too smart, and a little too close for comfort. Across parts of the Navajo Nation, people have reported encounters that match the same pattern again and again. Something tall, something fast, something that mimics animals, maybe, or people. Now, one witness described seeing a figure standing at the edge of the road at night, shaped like a man, but moving like an animal. When headlights hit it, the figure dropped onto all fours, and it kind of sprinted into the brush faster than anything humanly possible. Another reported hearing their own name whispered from the dark in a very familiar voice while camping miles from civilization. Now, in Navajo tradition, skinwalkers are said again to possess the ability to mimic voices, imitate animals, and move within human speed. They are not mindless creatures. They choose when to appear and to whom. Now, what makes these encounters chilling is their consistency. Different people, different locations, same description, same fear.
Let's start off today with a cryptid and work our way up to the big guys. So a YouTuber uploaded a video that was apparently filmed on September 26th or 27th of 2013 in the woods around Montreal, Quebec, Canada. In the video, an unidentified man films himself walking through the forest at night. Now, we're not sure why he does that, and also the original video has since been taken down, which might have had context. I'm pretty sure he's looking for something. Now it's just part of these compilations. Eventually, he comes upon something that frightens him, and after exclaiming, "Oh!" can't say that word, oh god, he immediately turns and begins running in the other direction. Given how dark the footage is, it's not entirely clear what he saw until you slow down the video and you zoom in. Further ahead on the trail, something appears to peek out briefly from a tree before returning to its original position behind said tree. The creature does not appear to be any type of known animal. Rather, it's pale, fish-faced, and with seemingly large eyes. It looks almost like a gray alien type. Look, this video is the real deal, and also if you think about it, it's got a very authentic feel to it. The reaction upon seeing the creature, like, this guy's genuinely startled. He's not rehearsed. I can tell I'm an actor. Now, one of my first thoughts when I saw this footage was like, oh, this cryptid, it's a hide behind, seeing as it ducks really fast. It's a nocturnal critter from American folklore that preys upon humans that wander the woods. It was blamed for the disappearances of early loggers when they failed to return to camp, and as the name suggests, it's able to conceal itself. When you look directly at it, it hides, ducks away. Look, it makes sense to me. You let me know in the comments what you think. As promised, it's UFO time. Alright, I'll be the first to admit we don't know as much about this footage as some of the other entries today, so bear with me. I found this video on Reddit, and while the site does tend to be the Wild West for finding credible information, I think my nonsense filter is pretty decent. So a while ago, user CuriousAD5774 said, don't got much to say about this video, other than when my dad originally sent it to me. I felt like it had to be a UFO, and there's nothing else that seemed to explain it. Now, Canada is notorious for sightings. I've seen a couple of them, and look, this video was taken way before drones were being used regularly. He thinks it's about 10 years old. So let's break down the video together, shall we? While watching the video, you can see a number of different orbs in a dark sky, and the way they move cannot be explained by science. Now, another commenter, Death Perception, has an idea of what it could be. He's like, yeah, this is pretty good footage, it's dark, it's an old video, but if we're all assuming it's real, pretty sure it is, then it's clearly the typical black triangle that's been seen since at least the 90s. Now somebody else, only capital 5393, was able to relate to the footage, saying it was exactly what their brother and mother described back in the 90s. They were driving in New Hampshire in the wee hours of the morning, going south, and this UFO came and followed them for a while on the highway. There was nobody else around, and it was just like hanging out. Whee! Here we go. The lights are exactly what they described though, how they kind of spin in a circle around the center light. And the commenter had never seen anything like they described until that moment. Now, he would have loved to have sent it to the mother and brother, but sadly they passed away. And if we want to talk about how credible the mom was as a witness, she was an Air Force flight nurse during Vietnam. If she hadn't seen it, come on. She had heard rumors about UFOs being real, by the way, and that made her pretty interested in the subject. She actually became like a UFOologist. She joined a lot of organizations, and at one meeting, she sat at the same table with Betty Hill. Time to fulfill another promise, and that's evidence of Bigfoot. Paul Freeman claims that while working as a watershed patroller for the US Forest Service back in 1982, he encountered a Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, near Walla Walla, Washington. Now, him being a whistleblower and talking about knowing about Bigfoot brought him a lot of criticism and disrupted his family's life, causing him to quit the job and relocate. But he returned to the area in 1984 and devoted the rest of his life to a search for evidence. He collected hair, photographs, and a wide variety of casts of footprints and other body parts. Now in 1992 he followed a series of tracks near Dybbuk Creek and got a close-up video. I'm also pretty sure some of the footage is from 1994, which was when he captured video near the Blue Mountains region of northeastern Oregon. Now the recordings are considered authentic by quite a few Bigfoot investigators, but sadly for us, a lot of the resolution is too low to be considered conclusive. But I'm pretty sure these videos hold credibility. Could they have been hoaxed? Sure. But I have too many doubts for it to be a fake. And also, the videos offer the possibility that these creatures have supernatural abilities. Now, if you're asking, yo, Alexa, who's this Paul Freeman guy? And why do you think these videos are so credible? Allow me. He was an American Bigfoot hunter, and he discovered a lot of tracks showing dermal ridges. And the plaster casts he made were convincing enough to be considered critical pieces of evidence by anthropologists. Now, if we're talking about which anthropologists, Jeff Meldrum of Idaho State University and Grover Krantz of Washington State University, they put a lot of time and resources into studying them. And it's hard to get resources to study things that aren't credible. Now sadly, Paul passed away in 2003, but he was adamant until the day he died that what he saw was real proof that Bigfoot is out there. On Saturday, March 11th of last year, William Church, a professional truck driver who regularly drove on Arizona State Route 87, noticed a bright glare in his dash cam. and he thinks the flashing figure is a ghost. Now, he's described himself as someone who has seen a lot of weird stuff during his travels, but he's been able to make sense or explain away everything, except for this video. The specter was spotted at around 2:30 in the morning while William drove past the highway's 200-mile marker, which is located between Phoenix and Payson, Arizona. And since it was that very ungodly hour, there was nobody on the road, and he captured something weird on his Nextcar dashcam, which I guess is a leading dashcam brand. And thankfully, we've got the footage. Granted, it's only 6 seconds long, so pay attention now. And now that we're back, I shall continue. He is positive the translucent figure y'all just saw looks like a person standing in the roadway, saying like he can see the lines through the legs that make up the figure. So if we want to give a little context on the area, Arizona State Route 87 is a north to south highway that was constructed in 1927 and measures approximately 272.66 miles. The north end travels to State Route 264 near Second Mesa, a census designated place in Arizona, while the south end travels to Interstate 10 near Picacho, an unincorporated community and another census designated place. Now, a lot of fatal accidents have happened on this 96-year-old highway, which has reportedly led some locals to believe that the road could be haunted. Look, a recent fatal car crash happened on State 87 near milepost 201 in February of last year, and last I checked, the exact cause of the crash is unknown. The two-person collision resulted in the death of one person near Bush Highway, which is east of Fountain Hills, and Valley Chevy dealers in Phoenix named State Route 87 one of Arizona's most dangerous roads. So, if you watch this video that we're talking about today, yeah, there's a lot of supernatural activity on these highways. Because why? Well, people die, spirits don't move on. And look, I'm speaking as somebody who drives, has a license. I don't want to see any ghosts when I'm driving tonight. No thank you. And how about we end today with some 2016 killer clown footage. Now, I'm friends with a lot of creepy clowns. I've been one myself. But 2016 was a rough year to be a clown. The 2016 clown sighting incidents were reported in the United States, Canada, Australia, and a lot of other countries and territories in August of that year. They were first reported in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in what turned out to be a marketing stunt for a horror film, but the phenomenon later spread to many other cities in the US. And by mid-October, clown sightings and attacks have been reported in nearly all of the US states, 9 out of 13 provinces and territories of Canada, and 18 other countries. Alright. Watch the video now before I start fuming over clown rights, and we can break it down after. So this footage shows the masked monster emerging from a motorway underpass and standing in the middle of the road, waving very creepily at the stopped car. Now when the figure starts walking towards the vehicle, the male driver tries to reverse away, but then the crazed clown makes a sudden dash towards the family in the car. And these guys were just trying to come home from like a nice dinner out. After backing up far enough, the panicked driver puts his foot down and speeds towards the clown, who jumps out of the road a split second before being mowed down by the car. Now, the driver who put his foot down and sped towards the clown, it's terrifying. In the original Facebook post, the wife of the driver wrote that the incident took place at Grange Mill Lane, and they were confronted by this person coming out from the underpath tunnel and charging at them. I don't know what to make of it. Like, as much as I love a good killer clown, such as one of my besties, Buttons, there's a reason they only exist in controlled fictional situations. And like this, if I ever saw a killer clown when I'm driving, absolutely not.
The first story is titled What Comes Next. It's a strange and unexplained story I found on a page dedicated to creepy real life stories. This is about a guy named Michael who grew up in the digital age. He loves smartphones and would always go for digital over real life social interactions. However, there was one night out of the week he would never miss, which was horror movie night with his buddies. His Friday night ritual was to watch the latest horror flick with his friends, then go home and just prepare for bed. On one of those nights, one of Michael's friends brought an old dusty VHS tape to watch. This was apparently found in the attic of a passed on family member's house in Vancouver. As his friend Jackson walked in with the tape, they were all really excited to give it a go. The host spent about 30 minutes looking for his old VHS player, and when they found it, they immediately took the tape, shoved it in, and began to watch. Right after the film started, there was nothing but silence in the room, so everyone, was seated tightly in their chair and was giving it their full attention. The film was actually about a demon that possessed its victims by presenting itself as a friend calling herself Lila. About halfway through the film became more and more sinister as Lila would establish a bond with her victims before she made her move. It almost seemed as though Lila cared about them before she destroyed their lives. Once fooled, she was able to possess them. You could see it in her dreadful eyes, long teeth, long nails, and shrunken face. The style in which the film was shot also made the group very uneasy, as it was mostly presented in the point of view of the victims and even the demon, making it unbelievably realistic. They began to feel breathless and helpless when the film ended, with Lila playing hopscotch with a group of friends that she met in a park. After everyone had finished watching the film, Michael, along with everyone else, was feeling physically exhausted from the film and just needed some fresh air. He didn't like what he had seen and wanted to basically just forget about it. I mean, I don't blame him, honestly. They then decided to watch a comedy to let some time pass, and after a short while, Michael was feeling good again and had basically forgotten about the film. The group then went to get some fast food and then went their separate ways. Now, later that night, Michael decided to de-stress and relax by playing some online slots before bed. He actually found that this was a great way to kind of unwind and just have a little bit of fun. It was late and he decided to get ready to shut off and prepare for sleep, but right before he shut off, he got a message from a girl called Lila. She invited him to check out this new online slot. Now, Michael was tired, and without even realizing who the message was actually sent from, he just opened the link and out of instinct and not knowing what was going to happen next. He did fall asleep, but then was actually woken up in like a puddle of sweat, completely drenched, to what he thought was just, a bad dream, like a nightmare where he was being watched by something that he couldn't quite explain. Now, over the next few days, Michael would begin to feel sick and even tell his friends that he wasn't feeling good and wouldn't make it to their next movie night, which he never missed. But here's the problem. Michael disappeared. He not only didn't make it to the next movie night, he didn't even make it out, period. His friends stopped hearing from him. He virtually just vanished, and although some time has passed, and most people assumed, that he just wanted to go live off the grid and disappear and, close everyone out, his close group of friends actually think otherwise, and they are convinced it has something to do with that VHS tape that they probably shouldn't have watched in the first place. Creepy. This next story comes from a Vespertine on Reddit. This person claims they inherited a collection of paranormal VHS tapes from their uncle, and they took them actually to a shop to try and sell them off. This person explains that throughout the 80s and 90s, his uncle recorded various tapes on his Retrovision TV and picked up some pretty spooky stuff. He explained that with his last breath, he told him to unhook the VCR and hide it with the tape collection, and so he did. But not even a day later, the Retrovision was gone, but the tapes were left untouched. He said, "I don't know who took it or how they knew about my uncle's passing so quickly, but I can only assume they didn't know about the tapes. I was terrified that they'd find out about the modifications and come back for the tapes, but they never did, and they've been in my possession ever since." Now, he continued to say, "My uncle told me to never watch the tapes alone, and I was too scared to ever tell anyone else about them, so I've never watched them. I don't know what's on them, but I know the kind of things you can see on a Retrovision, so I figured they might be worth something to the right buyer." Now, this shop owner looked at his collection of tapes and actually read them out. One was titled "And We All Fall Down," another titled "Crying Girl in the Woods," another was labeled as "It's Already Too Late," and one with the title "Pity Us." Now, the shop owner asked, "If your uncle's been gone for about 20 years or so, why are you only selling them now?" He responded by saying, "Well, I was pretty much still a kid when he passed, and by the time I was old enough to start looking into my uncle's occult connections, I had largely forgotten about the tapes. I just recently started poking around on HeroicHollows.net to see if I could find anything that might have had anything to do with my uncle, and that's how I found out about this place," which is the shop he was at. Now, the shop owner said, "Listen, kid, before I make you an offer, I'm going to have to check at least a few of these to make sure they're legit," nodding to the 13-inch TV and VCR combo that he already had waiting on his desk. Now, he hesitated for a moment. He knew before, he came in that he would need to watch the videos, and he had been looking forward to finally actually seeing what was on the tapes himself. But after so many years of avoiding the tapes, he was perhaps understandably, wary of what would happen when he finally unlocked their secrets. He said, "You think it's safe? If so, then go ahead." After a few seconds of static, a grainy and kind of desaturated image of a man in a chair, he appeared on screen, this man. He was sitting in a chair. The chair was cast from rusted steel, and while the room he was sitting in there was pretty concrete as far as they could see. The man was completely bald with a drawn and haggard face. His eyes were kind of a jaundiced yellow and his skin was brown like aged paper and hung very loosely off of his face, as if he had recently lost like an enormous amount of weight. Now his clothes were ragged and woven from, some coarse and kind of faded fabric, and he wondered if he was like a political prisoner of some kind. He held his gaze on the camera for a few seconds, looked down at a scrap piece of paper in his hands, and then cleared his throat and said, "It wasn't our fault. They demanded sacrifice. They demanded obedience we could not resist. All of our strength of mind and will and of our flesh was sacrificed in their name, and we had become too weak to resist." This whole speech went on for like several minutes with him talking about, sacrifices and just a lot of other cryptic things. The boy and the shop owner heard some sort of signal playing over the man's speech, and they said it was very unsettling and it was kind of like Morse code. Now the shop owner started to desperately press stop, pause, and eject on the VCR, trying to get the tape out. When the tape continued to play, he then knocked the TV to the ground. He then grabbed his cane and actually swung it at the TV to smash it. The shop owner screamed in frustration, falling to his knees, and basically said that, this was like a psychotronic signal that they heard, and once it was deep enough into their brains, it would pull them into a different reality. How he knew all this, I don't know, but they said they started hearing loud noises, and he forced himself to look up, and when he did, he said he saw like the silhouette of a demon among them that was slowly stretching its arm out to him. He said right before this demon kind of like touched him that the shop owner hit it with his cane again, and suddenly everything just disappeared. The shop owner said these tapes have the power to like summon demons and bring them into other realities, which is why his uncle probably never wanted him to show these to anyone or be seen by anybody. The shop owner said, had he watched these alone, he actually could have been sucked into another world with absolutely no way out. First up, we have the infamous Dybbuk box. You might have heard of this story before, but for those who haven't, let me fill you in. As the story goes, a Dybbuk box appeared in 2003 when antique store owner Kevin Manis bought a vintage wine box from a 103-year-old Holocaust survivor on eBay. After a strange string of unexplained hauntings, reoccurring nightmares, bruises, and smells of ammonia, the box found its way back onto eBay and landed in the hands of a man named Jason Haxton. Now, he too felt the wrath of the box and ended up burying it somewhere in Missouri, but not before pulling it out of the ground to appear on the television show Ghost Adventures. Haxton had paid $280 for the box, and when opened, contained a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies from the 1920s, a dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters. Haxton said that he didn't believe the stories associated with the box and didn't have any worries when opening it. He heard strange noises though, moving objects, and unexplained events that will send chills down your spine. Well, at least it did mine. The cabinet was described as a wine cabinet to him. Jason reported that he would start hearing these strange noises coming from the cabinet, such as like knocking sounds and whispers. He also claimed to have seen very, shadowy figures lurking around the cabinet, and even reported feeling the presence in the room with him. As the strange occurrences continued, Jason began to research, the history of the cabinet. He discovered that it had once belonged to a Jewish family who had immigrated to the United States from Poland. The family had reportedly used the cabinet to store their belongings, but had also used it as a makeshift altar. Now, Jason became convinced that the cabinet was haunted, and according to the legend, a Dybbuk is a spirit that is created when a person passes in a state of great emotional turmoil, such as sadness or anger. The spirit is said to be trapped between the world of the living and the afterlife, and is often drawn to objects or places that hold a lot of sentimental value. As the occurrences continued, Jason decided to seek out the help of a rabbi who specialized in Jewish mysticism. Now, the rabbi performed a ritual to cleanse the cabinet of the Dybbuk, but it didn't work apparently. Jason eventually became so convinced that the cabinet was just way too haunted and decided to sell it. It definitely wouldn't have taken me that long. It would have been gone night one, but I guess he really loved the cabinet. However, despite trying to sell it, he soon discovered it wasn't easy to get rid of. Several people people who had purchased the cabinet from him reported experiencing the same occurrences, including nightmares, noises, even physical attacks. Once Jason did get rid of it, it was actually purchased by another collector who then chose to remain anonymous. That collector reported experiencing strange things as well. Apparently, the two at one point had actually gotten together to discuss their experiences with the box and shared stories. And, he helped actually Jason track down the family that originally had the box. But what makes this story even more terrifying is that, again, these are real people. Jason wrote a book about it, which, went on to sell a lot of copies. And it is, of course, one of the most haunted books that exists. Today, the Dybbuk box is actually said to be in the possession of the anonymous collector, who has reportedly taken whatever steps necessary to just protect himself and his family from the evil spirit. However, the legend of the Dybbuk box continues to captivate people around the world. It may remain, convinced that it is indeed haunted, and Jason's story has been the subject of much debate and speculation. Now, there's also footage on YouTube, though, of a man named Joseph Mazzaferro opening a Dybbuk box at 3 a.m. It's frightening. I had my eyes half shut the whole time. You can hear something speaking back to him. I won't ruin it for you, but go look for it for yourself and let me know what you think. Next up, we have the No End House story. This one's a bit more recent, and it's based on a very popular internet urban legend. The story goes that a man named Brian Russell explored an abandoned house with a strange layout where, each room seemed to shift and change. It's framed as a lengthy first-person account of, a trip through this really weird, twisted house. It's a haunted attraction that boosts a series of scarier and scarier rooms. But the twist, which isn't really a spoiler given that, the TV show uses it to cap off the first episode, is that the person telling the story might not have ever even left the house. The footage shows Brian navigating the house, but what starts as a curious exploration, quickly turns into a desperate fight for survival. But here's the thing, this footage is allegedly real, and Brian Russell is a real person. He's a filmmaker who actually created the footage as part of a project, but the way it's presented makes it seem like it's actual found footage. So there's a lot of speculation over that. And let me tell you, it is seriously unsettling. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but wait, isn't found footage just a bunch of shaky cameras and fake scares? And to that I say, not always. Sometimes found footage can be genuinely terrifying, especially when it's based on real events. Next, we have the Phoenix Lights incident in 1997. Thousands of people in Phoenix, Arizona reported seeing a massive V-shaped UFO in the sky. The footage shows a strange glowing object hovering above the city, and it's genuinely chilling. But what makes this story even more fascinating is that the footage is real and it was captured by multiple people on different cameras. It's one of the most well-documented UFO sightings in history, and it's still unexplained to this very day. On March 13th, 1997, two formations of lights were sighted in the skies over the valley and other parts of Arizona. One was shaped like a V and cruised across the sky, while the other was a series of glowing orbs that appeared in a line near the Sierra Estrella mountain range. The two incidents became known just as the Phoenix Lights, one of the largest and best known UFO sightings in history. Now, thousands of people across Arizona witnessed this phenomenon, which caused, a kind of hullabaloo in the media over the next few months that grew into a worldwide obsession. Despite the public, searching for answers about what caused, the Phoenix Lights, both at the time and over, the ensuing decades, no official investigation has ever actually occurred. Several explanations were put forth to explain the mysterious lights, ranging from helicopters to camera lens flares. But of course, the favorite explanation was a spacecraft. Did we finally have good video proof that mankind is being visited by aliens? Well, who knows? Others ones weren't so sure though, and suggested that the bright lights resembled nighttime skydivers with flares. To some, this explanation seemed even more outlandish than, extraterrestrial, spacecrafts flying by to watch, a high school football game. I mean, what would skydivers be doing with flares in the night sky though? And if they were skydivers and had done this before, why wouldn't people have known about it or even recognized it? Was it, a prank or a hoax? As the story got more and more, publicity, a helicopter pilot for Fox Channel 10, actually, his name was Rick Krebs, he went on air and basically told what he knew, and apparently he knew a lot.
We're kicking things off with a movie that's so heinous this, technically I shouldn't be talking about it. I can't even say the words that make up its title. We're gonna call it the people-eating mass extinction event of the 1930s. So this flick wasn't the director's first movie about people eating, but it was definitely the one that got the most flack from the media. His name is Ruggero Deodato, by the way. He'd been making films since the 1960s, and he had this trademark style. Flashy, grimy pictures with a hardened edge, and plenty of coitus and violence. He was one of many Italian directors who facilitated the people-eating boom of the late 1970s, and he'd already made a film about it, The Last C-Word World, before he got around to this one. So this movie is the story of a professor journeying to the Amazon to discover what happened to a film crew of missing brave young Americans, only to realize that this characterization couldn't have been further from the truth. From the get-go, the movie looks at how the mass media portrays its fellow Americans, the marginalization of those outside the land of the free, and what it means to be civilized. The young filmmakers are immediately positioned by the media as victims of local savagery, and when anthropologist Dr. Monroe is set to find them, it is only through his embracing of culture that he comes across the lost film reels that's going to piece all of this together. Broadcasting executives back in New York are foaming at the mouth at the prospect of a new documentary, even more sensational, let's give it to me. Well, these filmmakers are so focused on sensation and viewing figures that the sizzle reel that they show includes, well, just a couple of little antics. Oh, what? Well, let's see. Forcible amputation. Why? Well, somebody got a snake bite and something had to go. Now, there isn't a lot more I can talk about in detail when it comes to the plot of this one for safety reasons, as is the case with a lot of old school exploitation flicks. Everything was seized on the grounds of obscene stuff. But then something crazy happened. By the way, this is real world stuff. All of this became evidence in criminal proceedings. This wasn't just a plain old too devious for public consumption theatrical release. People thought this was a snuff film, and apparently the weirdos who made it were so brazen that we're gonna throw a premiere for it. The director was brought up on killing charges, and he was forced to bring his actors in for interviews to be like, look, they're alive, they're just good actors. So then he had to demonstrate how they did a lot of the special effects in the movie. Thankfully, eventually all the charges were dismissed, but whew, the courts eventually overturned the movie's ban several years afterwards. But by this point, the director and a lot of his associates had a lot of legal troubles, and everybody was like, we can't show this. Also, they were really censoring it. By the way, before I move on, the film isn't without its faults. Although 6 animal deaths appear on screen, 7 animals sadly lost their lives for the production, because there's the scene where the monkey dies. It was done twice. So I'm not saying it's ethically great, but yeah. Before the shot-for-shot American remake called Quarantine, Rec was a claustrophobic Spanish found footage effort that brought a fresh dose of claustrophobia and terror to the zombie genre. A TV reporter and her cameraman are conducting a routine interview at a local fire station when an emergency call comes in. Accompanying the firefighters to a nearby apartment, the news team begins recording the crazy screams coming from inside an elderly woman's unit. After authorities seal off the building to contain the threat, the news crew, firefighters, and residents are stuck facing a lethal terror inside. With the camera running, survival for everybody involved seems kind of unlikely. So Rec is quite unsettling as it moves at a restless clip, using the found footage device to inject a new kind of immediacy to the zombie concept, which is kind of funny because normally zombies are quite slow. The plot is simple enough, and the cast is populated by stock characters, but the film overcomes the shackles of its tropes with pure energy and, well, how it did things, including the absence of any music on the soundtrack until the end of it. So it often really does feel like you're watching a horrific documentary, one that continues with the same breathless momentum in the sequel. And as the unpredictability of the scares goes from one act to the next, it's kind of hard to watch without some lights on. Looking to cash in on the success of films like Paranormal Activity and The Last Exorcism, The Devil Inside tries its best to be something that is, well, doomed to fail. The film desperately wants to have that same creepiness and, all the stuff that made its predecessor so great. But unfortunately for director William Brent Bell, The Devil Inside squanders what could have been a pretty good movie, opting instead to rely on found footage trends in a bad way, and also a horrible, pretentious ending. So this movie revolves around a woman named Isabella Rossi. She travels to Italy to investigate her mother's involvement in a series of exorcisms gone wrong. Along with a documentary filmmaker, they visit a mental institution to meet with her mom. Now, this film was kind of, well, it was the worst movie of 2012. And it's very, very bad, and not bad in a good way. It's the kind of bad that gives bad a bad name. Lingering only on one screen in just one movie theater 5 weeks after its release. Look, the people filming this must have been like, oh, we can fix this in post. Yet, turns out they can't. No retroactive intervention would infuse a single frame of it with the merest little bit of terror that was promised in the ad campaign. And because of this, the producers were kind of forced to rely on an entirely, well, it was just a cop-out. And it ended the film with a link to a website at which further information on the case in the movie can be found. Sure, on the surface, the premise is actually somewhat intriguing. The Italian backdrop seems like a cool locale for a movie like this. We all know, like, Italian films tend to really go for it. And the prospect of unsanctioned exorcisms is also a nice twist on the genre, good trope, and there are a few interesting character-driven subplots that really could have taken the story to another level. But here's the problem. None of these things ever reach a sound conclusion. But on top of that, the writing and acting, it's not really it. Grandma and Helmuth are kinda bad, making the already too serious tone seem all the more ridiculous. And even some of the really good acting is just really wasted on some brutal dialogue that's only really reserved for like student films. This is only amplified when the characters speak directly into the camera as they launch into massive streams of exposition and pointless narration. The R-rated language also seems really forced and unnecessary, especially when the demons cast out taunts at Isabella and the priests. It seems like somebody just learned a bunch of bad words and they're like, we're gonna say it all right now. VHS was one of the most exciting horror anthologies in recent years, and it managed to find a newer spin on the found footage genre by giving a bunch of emerging filmmaking talent the opportunity to explore the approach in their own unique ways. It contains contributions from some of the more ambitious micro-budget American filmmakers working today, which none of them also exclusively work in horror. The concept's parameters were kind of simple. They were developed by Brad Miska, founder of the horror fan site BLOODY Disgusting. A group of young hooligans are tasked with stealing a mysterious tape from an ominous home. When they come across a heap of unidentified tapes, well, then we've got the framing device begins, as each cassette contains another morbid encounter. What happens? Well, the resulting experience is their own private horror festival, with shorts by known indie filmmakers David Bruckner, Glenn McQuaid, Joe Swanberg, T. West, and the online filmmaking collective known as Radio Silence. Now, despite the chorus of indie names involved in its production, VHS maintains a surprisingly fluid structure. The lo-fi video quality and overwhelming atmosphere carry over into each chapter. Most segments have a fair share of cheap scares, but they also delve into the art of the build-up, delivering a series of grim jokes with some really great punchlines. It works to a large degree because it asks for original lo-fi stories from filmmakers who already excelled at doing just that, and it's a total blast to see them all working together in ghoulish harmony. The equally delightful sequel, by the way, proved this approach wasn't an anomaly, but like, we want more. And finally for today, Stephen Cognetti's House LLC. Yeah, it might not have much to distinguish it from other found footage films in terms of setup, but it was so good. So what's the premise? Well, there's this documentary crew investigating a haunted house that's been closed for about 15 years, only for the ghosts of the past to haunt them and leave everybody dead. Oh, spoiler. With such a bare-bones setup, it doesn't have a lot to work with, but it does so well at a high level. The director excels at building out a demented specific landscape for his cast to run around in, and delivers genuinely terrifying terrors to match. Some aspects work, some don't, but you get some sequels. I think it's a great example of modern-day horror at its finest. There's some pretty decent scares. The props the group uses, by the way, in particular the mannequins with the masks, pretty scary. The limited view of Paul's camcorder makes for some unsettling moments, even though there's a couple of times where it's like, dude, just put down the camera and help your friends or run away. But it works. Oh, before I forget, by the way, if you're afraid of clowns, maybe tread lightly with this one.
Starting with the battered VHS tape, this story comes from a person on Reddit who claims that the story is true. It starts by them saying that one time in the mid to late 90s, they had a famous relative who would get a lot of fan mail, most of which was just photographs of their dogs, friendship pendants, etc. Not super weird stuff, but some a little creepy and almost stalkerish. Like they said one day, a padded envelope arrived and in it was a battered home movie tape with a handwritten label on it. Now they said they never heard of the title, but considered themselves to be a movie buff, so thought that they would just give it a go. They said a few days later they were alone in the house for the night and they thought, you know, what better time to watch this movie? So they locked the doors, got a blanket, made some popcorn, even their stuffed teddy, and pressed play. They said what followed was one of the most terrifying and traumatic experiences of their life. The film was fuzzy and filmed on handheld cameras like a home movie. They said it ran for about 2 hours and they were scared out of their mind the entire time. So the person on Reddit went on to say that this movie ended up being the Blair Witch Project. But the creepy thing is that Blair Witch wouldn't actually come out in theaters for another 3 to 4 months. So this to him was very much real and scary, and people in the comments assume that whoever sent him this tape had to have, been a friend or a family member who worked in the film industry to have their hands on it. Now, the writer on Reddit said to them, this was as real as it could get. They didn't watch it in theaters, around people. They watched it in the dark by themselves in their home, months before Blair Witch became, well, Blair Witch. I mean, arguably, Blair Witch is the flagship for found footage, and love it or hate it, it still terrifies people to this day. I know it scared me, and when I watched it as a kid in theaters, so I could imagine how scared he was. Number 2 is the white tapes of Japan. Now, in Japan, a series of VHS tapes known as the white tapes, or known as the Shiroi VTR, were said to be cursed, bringing misfortune and terror to those who watched them. The tapes, which were reportedly created by a mysterious individual or group, contained strange and disturbing footage, including images of ghosts, demons, and other supernatural entities. Now, one viewer who reported watching one of the white tapes claimed to have experienced a series of terrifying and unexplained events, including strange noises, movements, and even physical attacks by an unseen force. The white tapes, apparently originated in Japan in the 1980s and are believed to have actually derived from a city there named Osaka. The tapes are said to contain extremely strange and disturbing images, like close-up of eyes, mouths, teeth, and other body parts that are often, distorted or manipulated in some way or the other. Mysterious symbols, codes, and writings will usually appear on screen, often in conjunction with the unsettling images. Now, fragments of stories or scenes that seem to honestly make no sense at all often feature people of characters in severe distress, and according to legend, anyone who watches the white tapes will be cursed with a series of terrifying and unexplained events, such as nightmares and visions. A lot of viewers have reported experiencing very vivid and disturbing dreams. Some people believe, the white tapes are a form of psychological warfare or a hoax designed to just manipulate and frighten those who watch. Some have even thought that they might be a portal to another dimension. Number 3, the ghost tape of the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel in Colorado is said to be haunted by the ghost of its former owner, F.O. Stanley. Now, in the 1980s, a VHS tape was discovered in the hotel's basement, which was said to contain footage of the hotel's ghostly apparitions. Now, however, viewers who watched the tape reported experiencing very strange phenomena, including unexplained noises, movements, and even some physical harm. One viewer who reported watching the tape claimed to have experienced a series of just terrifying and unexplained events, strange noises happening, movements suddenly around them, and even physical attacks by an unseen force. Now, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park in Colorado is renowned as one of the most haunted hotels in the entire United States. The hotel has become a well-known location for paranormal activity, with guests and employees alike reporting strange occurrences. The hotel gained further notoriety after Stephen King and his wife stayed in room 217 in 1974, which actually inspired the novel and movie The Shining, solidifying its reputation as a haunted place. This room is said to be haunted by the spirit of Mrs. Elizabeth Wilson, the head housekeeper who actually passed in an explosion during a snowstorm. Guests have reported lights turning on and off, objects moving on their own, and even cold spots. And many suggest that a portal, hovering over the grand staircase is the cause of numerous hauntings. Guests report hearing, children's laughter on the 4th floor with no one actually present there. Flora Stanley, the hotel owner's wife, is rumored to play the piano in the concert hall. Now, the Stanley Hotel has been investigated by numerous paranormal teams, including those, from Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures and Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters, so check that out. Number 4, the cursed tape of the Dybbuk box. Now, in 2004, a VHS tape was discovered in a mysterious box known as the Dybbuk box, which was said to be cursed by a malevolent spirit. Now, the tape, which contained strange and very disturbing footage, was reportedly created by a mysterious individual and was said to bring misfortune and terror to anyone who watched it. So one viewer who reported watching the tape claimed to have experienced a series of terrifying and just unexplained events. Again, a lot of strange noises in the house, movements around them, and sometimes, yes, physical attacks on them as well. Now, this whole thing actually started back in 2003, though, a year earlier, when a man named Jason Haxton won an online auction for the box and received it. I think it was on eBay. He said, the day it arrived, I put my hands on it, and it almost feels like the thing collapses into a liquid state. I feel like a is coming into my gut. I'm paralyzed in pain. When I go to bed, I have terrible dreams of a hag that seems to come with the box. Haxton said he first heard about the box from a colleague whose roommate had listed it for sale after bizarre experiences, including hair loss and smelling bad odors that he associated with a Dybbuk. Now, the box owner put it on eBay, and according to the listing, the person selling the piece had purchased it in September of 2001 at an Oregon estate sale of a war survivor who passed away at 103 years old. The listing stated the woman got the wine cabinet while living in Spain, and it was among the few things she brought with her when she immigrated to America after the war. Paxton only paid $280 for the box, which, instead of wine, contained a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies from the 1920s, a dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with gilded Hebrew letters. Haxton said, he didn't believe the stories associated with the box since he was too, science-based, but he then of course began experiencing what he has called just a tidal wave of bad luck. And last but not least, number 5, the haunted tape of the Bell Witch. It's a legend centered around the 19th century Bell family of Robertson County, Tennessee, who were allegedly haunted by an entity known as the Bell Witch, which caused various frightening phenomena for years. The tape and cave are actually part of the Bell Witch Cave, which is a real place near the Bell family homestead where locals report, being attacked and where potential human remains and bones have been found. Now, starting in 1817, the family and the surrounding area experienced a very long series of strange and frightening occurrences. Physical manifestations, people speaking, apparently shape-shifting, all supposedly caused by an entity referred to as the Bell Witch. Now, a cave located near the original Bell homestead, which is known as Bell Witch Cave, is now associated with the legend as well. Now, some accounts suggest visitors to the cave report experiencing paranormal activity, strange noises, all that fun stuff. Now, John Bell Sr., the head of the family, is said to have mysteriously passed away after being haunted by the Bell Witch for several years, with some accounts suggesting poisoning as the cause of his death, but who knows? Now, the story of the Bell Witch legend has inspired various forms of media, including films, documentaries, and even podcasts. There's a few movies you can watch, one from 2004 called The Bell Witch Haunting, which is a found footage horror film, and one from 2013 owning the same name, so check those out if you're interested.
Is Queen Elizabeth haunting Windsor Castle almost 2 years after she died? Well, according to a royal superfan who was on the premises as the building is open to the public, the late monarch was apparently captured in some snapshots they had taken. Radar Online reported that the visitors spotted a white flash in their lens while taking photos inside the castle. Kind of similar to an orb. Now, they say I'm not a believer in anything beyond the grave, but I don't think there's any arguing with these images. I am fully aware people will say this could be a trick of the lens or a light flash or whatever, but I've looked into it and it's highly unlikely the form of my image is any of that. It's clearly the Queen's spirit and she looks so unsettled. You can tell by the expression on her face. She looks like she's in limbo and lost. They added, I'm a royalist and it was sad for me to think she is wandering around forever, just dressed in one of the outfits she used to wear on state visits. You can see she's got the old handbag, coat, and hat. I'm stunned I captured this, and it's no wonder she's troubled. Look at the mess her family's in. She used to be the glue that held the institution together, and she now looks anguished over what is happening to it. What do you think? Is the Queen haunting us? This horrifying footage shows the dramatic moment a 100-foot wide sinkhole swallowed up a soccer pitch in just a matter of seconds. So this terrifying video emerged from Illinois in the US, showing just how quickly things can go from being fine to being like a scene from an apocalyptic movie. So in this particular case, 2 perfectly good artificial soccer and football fields were destroyed in just 5 seconds. Nowadays, a crater sits in the middle of Gordon F. Moore Community Park in the city of Alton, but I guess things could have been a lot worse. Fortunately for everybody, the pitches weren't in use, because if they were, anybody within a couple of feet of the sinkhole would not be here today, going off of the sheer ferocity that the floodlight was thrown into the gaping hole. But how does something like this even happen? Also, what is a sinkhole? Like, we've all heard this word. And well, yes, we do know that it is a hole that randomly appears in the ground, or at least it's random to us. I think that's the extent of my knowledge. What about you? So a sinkhole is a depression in the ground that has no natural external surface drainage. Long story short, this just means that when it rains, all the water stays inside the sinkhole and typically drains into the subsurface. And according to the United States Geological Survey, or USGS for short, they're most common in what geologists call karst terrain. These are the regions where the types of rock below the land surface can naturally be dissolved by groundwater circulating through them. So soluble rocks include salt beds, domes, gypsum, limestone, other carbonate rock. So while Florida, for instance, is an area largely underlain by limestone, it's highly susceptible to sinkholes. So when water from rainfall moves down through the soil, these types of rocks begin to dissolve, and that's how we get those underground spaces and caverns. Sinkholes are dramatic because the land usually stays intact for a period of time until the underground spaces just get too big, and then all gone. The historic Plaza Resort and Spa on A1 and Seabreeze Boulevard in Daytona Beach has seen a lot of comings and goings, including spring breakers back in the 90s, but some ghostly visitors back in 2013 left a lot of employees kind of spooked. Why? Well, it's simple. They thought the hotel was haunted. This place is well over a century old, and the employees think some former guests might have either returned or never left. Hotel security chief Chris Lankowitz and his staff were watching security monitors when they saw something odd moving through a downstairs bar. They're like, it wasn't dust, wasn't a flashlight, there was nobody on property causing stuff to mess with, other employees. Apparently this apparition moved about, changing sizes, and when a guard went down to check, the ghostly presence was hiding. There was nothing around. And even though the guard couldn't see anything, he felt something. And later, on the security video, the apparition almost took on the shape of a person and then bolted. Employees said there have been strange sightings and sounds from all corners of the hotel, the hallways, the bathrooms, and even hotel rooms. Kinda like room 1111, where a guest apparently fell to his death from a balcony about 7 years before. According to the head of security, he's like, I've had doors held, like you're pulling on a door and the door is not locked, and you walk in and there's nobody in there. So because of the scary activity in the bar and other suspicious activity, a paranormal investigator was supposed to pay the hotel a visit and even stay in one of these supposedly haunted rooms. But sadly, I couldn't find any records of an investigation, so let me know in the comments if you know anything. A homeowner was left stunned when he went onto his home security camera footage after his dog's persistent barking to find a spooky figure outside the home. Retired professional driver Corey Fletcher from Minnesota, USA, was kind of confused when his dog named Diva began barking persistently at the door, which normally indicates somebody's outside. However, when Corey went to check outside his house, he didn't see anything. And he's like, okay, what's my dog barking at? Corey was like, alright, we're gonna do the rational thing. We decided to check the footage, seeing as our living room window was open and Diva was barking up a storm. Now, according to Corey, Diva never barks at anything unless specifically there is somebody right at the door. So when she barks, they assume there's somebody at the house. But the barking wasn't stopping. When Diva kept making a fuss, Corey was like, okay, let's check the security camera footage. Maybe somebody played Ding Dong Ditch, and he was kind of shocked at what he saw. The footage appears to show a strange translucent figure walking past his home. And things got spookier when Corey realized that the camera had not picked up any human movement, because when it does that, it kind of circles them to pinpoint. But during this footage, there was no anything, just the silhouette of this strange figure. So Corey was like, when I went looking outside, there was still no one there. But he came back inside and Diva was still intensely looking outside, and that's what made him check the footage. And we don't know if the creature ever went away, but hopefully Diva gets some peace. And finally for today, Canadian tourist Elisa Lam was enjoying a lovely vacation to Los Angeles in the beginning of 2013, having chosen to stay in the infamous Cecil Hotel for its reasonable pricing while she took in the sights, including a trip to the San Diego Zoo, a taping of Conan, all of which she documented on social media. So initially she was assigned a shared room on the hotel's 5th floor, but then her roommates were like, she's kinda weird. So she was moved to a room of her own after 2 days. According to Amy Price, who was the manager of the hotel at the time of Elisa's disappearance, she was leaving notes for her roommates that said go home, go away. She would lock the door, ask for a password. She wasn't doing so well. She contacted her parents in British Columbia daily while traveling, up until the day she went poof. On January 31st of 2013, the day she was scheduled to check out of the hotel, her parents didn't hear from her, and they called the Los Angeles Police Department and made the decision to fly to LA and figure things out. So Katie Orphan, manager of the last bookstore, was the only person who saw Elisa that day, describing her as outgoing, lively, very friendly. She was buying gifts to bring home to her family, and Katie recalled a conversation they had about how heavy certain books would be to carry around for a day. Well, what happened? Police were searching the hotel, well, to the extent that they legally could, and they searched her room. They had dogs go through the building, including the rooftop, but they couldn't find her scent. Since the police didn't have, probable cause that any sort of crime had been committed, they couldn't search every room. Well, on February 6th, a week after she had been declared as missing, the police were like, okay, maybe we need to do a bit more. So they posted flyers everywhere. They posted stuff online. They were like, okay folks, help us find this girl. Interest in her disappearance increased on February 13th when the LAPD released security camera footage of her behaving erratically in the hotel elevator on the last day she was seen alive. And that was the footage we have for you today, and it went viral. During the search for her, guests at the hotel began complaining about low water pressure. Some folks were like, why is this water discolored? Also, it really tastes wrong. Well, on the morning of February 19th, Santiago Lopez, a hotel maintenance worker, found her body in one of 4 1,000-gallon tanks located on the roof that provided water to guest rooms, kitchen, coffee shop. And through the open hatch, he sadly saw her body. The tank was drained. It was cut open because apparently its maintenance hatch was too small to accommodate the equipment needed to remove the body, leading a lot of folks to wonder, how did she even get in there? Now, I'm not going to go into any graphic detail because no thank you, and I don't know why that information is even out on the internet. You can look that up yourself, but there's no evidence of anything traumatic, nothing suggesting she took her own life, no force. Toxicology tests showed traces consistent with prescription medication that was found amongst her belongings, and some non-prescription stuff that was kind of common. Now, there's a very small quantity of one substance, but nothing crazy. Poor thing.
The Linda Vista Community Hospital, located in Los Angeles, California. Linda Vista Community Hospital is a former hospital located at 61030 South Street, St. Louis Street in Los Angeles, California. Now, it's in the Boyle Heights neighborhood. The hospital was originally constructed for employees of the Santa Fe Railroad and called the Santa Fe Coastlines Hospital. Now, the hospital gained notoriety as one of America's most haunted hospitals, originally treating gang violence victims in the 1970s and 1980s. The hospital closed in 1991. After its closure, the hospital became a very popular filming location for productions, including films, TV shows, and music videos. It has also become the subject of several paranormal investigations. Now, the hospital was sold in 2011 and converted into a low-income senior living facility called Hollenbach Terrace in 2015. Linda Vista Community Hospital is widely known for its alleged hauntings. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps, moaning, and groaning even after the hospital was closed down. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving around the premises, especially in the emergency rooms. Now, a ghostly figure resembling a doctor pacing the corridors has been reported by some investigators, and a pacing young woman on the 3rd floor, as well as the spirit of an orderly still making his rounds. Now, one person actually shared their story from a visit and said, "We were live streaming at 2:03 a.m. in the pediatric wing of Linda Vista when our camera picked up a shadow crawling along the ceiling. No footsteps, no noise, just this thing that kind of slithered like it had no bones. When we reviewed the footage later, we caught what looked like a face, red eyes, very sharp cheekbones, staring straight into the lens. None of us saw it in real time, but all 3 cameras did." That's terrifying. The Bielitz-Heilstatten Hospital in Brandenburg, Germany. Now, the Bielitz-Heilstatten Hospital, located near Berlin, is actually known for its eerie atmosphere in association with historical figures, aka the bad guys. While some claim it's haunted, others say the ghostly reputation actually stems from the abandoned state and the echoes of the past. Now, the hospital's history includes use as a sanatorium, a place for war officials, and later a Soviet army hospital. Now, Bielitz-Heilstatten was a large hospital complex with a very long history, including periods of a tuberculosis sanatorium and location for notable figures, and the building's abandoned state and the stories surrounding its past have contributed to a sense of unease and a claim of it just being haunted. Now, Bielitz has a reputation for its wild World War II era history and neurological experiments. Now, there's a local legend of a ghost named Schleicher von Bielitz, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who is said to have roamed the halls in the late 90s as well as the early 2000s, deterring vandals and misbehaving kids. Now, this legend adds to the overall eerie atmosphere of the site. One person actually shared a story on Reddit and said, "What we caught on tape was something deeper. In the surgical ward, we heard knocking from behind sealed walls. The knocks turned into scratching, then into a very deep, growling voice that simply said, 'Believe,' which is German for stay. So we left the audio file while it got corrupted that night." That's creepy, right? I'm glad they didn't follow orders and they did decide to leave, because that's one thing you won't ever need me to do. I'll be gone faster than you can blink, so believe that. Now, some sections of the hospital are still used for neurological rehabilitation as well as Parkinson's Parkinson's research, and it has also been used as a film set for movies like The Pianist as well as Valkyrie. Now, visitors can access the site, and there are tours available, so let me know if you ever visit. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. Now, this National Historic Landmark served as a sanctuary for the mentally ill in the mid-1800s. This 160-year-old asylum holds very fascinating stories. It includes Civil War raids and also a gold robbery. There are also stories about the curative effects of architecture. Now, the efforts of determined individuals helped better the lives of the mentally ill. Now, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, now widely considered one of the most haunted destinations in America, it actually operated from 1864 all the way to 1994. Although it was designed for 250 patients, about 2,400 were actually crammed in there, and they were treated very poorly. Now, ghost hunts of this massive building run year-round, and one person shared their experience there. He said when he visited for a tour, he expected to be joined by, hardcore paranormal investigators, kind of weighed down with camera gear and digital recorders, but it wasn't like that at all. He said, we broke into smaller groups, spending 2 hours on each of the asylum's 4 floors before rotating. Our tour guide told us about some of the hospital's better known spirits, including a little girl named Lily who was born in the asylum, a man named Jesse who actually passed away of a heart attack in a bathtub, Civil War soldiers, as well as a patient who was kind of unalived brutally by his roommates. Now, he said the hospital is so vast that it was easy to end up alone despite, the dozens of other people wandering around. It was also easy to feel lost amid the maze of hallways and patient rooms, covered in peeling paint. He said we were filming a kind of lights out challenge inside the woman's ward. He said at 3:14 a.m. a camera set up in the hallway caught a figure walking backwards in complete silence. When we tried to enhance the image, its face blurred like static, but the eyes, pure black, stayed very clear. Now, paranormal experts later told them that what they saw was a shadow parasite. He continued to say by 4:30 a.m., he's like, I was ready to go. He said, as I drove away, I thought about whether I actually believed what I saw. He said, I've always been fascinated by ghosts, but am I convinced they exist? Honestly, not sure. There's actually a lot of stories from this hospital, so search it up on Google if you're intrigued. The Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York. Now, one of the most haunted locations in the whole of the United States. It was established in 1827. The Rolling Hills Asylum, or the Genesee County Poorhouse, which was originally a working farm, soon became a refuge for some of society's less fortunate. So widows and orphans mingled with the mentally ill, and the unclaimed passed on were actually buried on the property. With over 1,700 documented demises and hundreds not recorded, it's no wonder, Haunted North America rated it as the second most haunted site in the United States. Often resembling a reformatory, a poorhouse often housed orphan children, families, destitute elderly, physically handicapped, mentally unstable, morally corrupt, even criminals. Now, these institutions were situated on the grounds of a poor farm on which, able-bodied residents were actually required to work. Such farms were, actually very common in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, a poorhouse was a government-run facility for the support and housing of dependent or just needy persons, typically run by a local government entity such as, a county or a municipality. Now, institutions of this nature were widespread in the United States prior to the adoption of the Social Security program in the 1930s. Residents were referred to as inmates, no matter, why they were housed there, and those physically able-bodied would have to work the farm, and many actually built and made wares to sell, to help offset some of their living expenses. Now, the raising of Holstein's pigs, draft horses, chickens, and ducks, raising vegetable and fruit crops, canning jams, jellies, meats, that was all part of their chores. One visitor shared their visitation story online and said, I was standing in the solitary confinement corridor when a deafening scream erupted from the far end. The problem? Well, that hallway had caved in years ago, but the camera caught the scream echoing, bouncing unnaturally as if it came from inside our own equipment. The audio waveform even shows a second, much deeper voice overlapping the scream, like something was inside of her. Well, as creepy as that is, I bet some of you would still like to visit, am I right? Well, there's an upcoming event on June 4th. It's about 5 hours and it costs about $600. So if you've got the nerve, the time, and the money, check it out and thank me later.
The internet is the best place to witness real spirits or ghosts, or simply videos with no explanation. Adding to the lot is this latest viral video, shared in a Facebook group called Ghosts Caught on Camera by a user named Brianna Granados on May 29th of this year. The 10-second clip shows the recording of a kitchen closed at midnight, and at the beginning of the video, everything seems normal, but suddenly a tentacle-like thing close to the camera appears on the right side of the frame. It stays on the side and moves the camera towards it. But the identity of whatever that was is not revealed. The poster of the clip goes into more detail on it in the caption. So according to her, they have experienced strange things in their mom's house since, well, as long as they can remember. We're talking loud banging noises, utensils falling, footsteps, all the usual suspects. She wrote further that they always had the feeling they weren't the only ones living there. And then recently, there's been a lot more activity. So, Mommy Dearest sets up a motion detector camera, and now we get this. The poster revealed that they recorded a few orbs, and then we've got this little, I don't know what. So adding on to the details, this was recorded after 10 o'clock, around midnight, while everybody was asleep. But then you get a notification being like, oh hey, there's movement in the living room, and then this is what we got. So then it's concluded with, does anybody have any thoughts or ideas as to what this could be? And I don't know, so let me know what you think in the comments, folks. Security cameras at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, or TALA, in Lewis County captured something that seemingly can't be explained. A video that is timestamped as of May 31st at 7:45 p.m. earlier this year shows items falling off a shelf in the asylum gift shop. Now this place closes at 6 p.m. So in the Facebook post, the asylum said that during the video, the doors were locked, the windows were closed. The TALA shared the video on social media, and it went pretty viral, had about 150,000 views, and people have speculated in the comment section being like, hey, I don't know. Some folks think this is a definite sign of the paranormal. Everybody else is like, hey, great marketing stunt. The TALA, formerly known as the Old Weston State Hospital, was a treatment center for mentally ill patients. It was open from 1864 to 1994. Originally built to house about 250 people, at its peak in the 1950s, 2,400 people were housed there, and thousands are now buried in the cemetery in unmarked graves. Turns out there's a lot of speculation about possible paranormal activity at the hospital. There's ghost tours, there's private ghost hunts, and around Halloween they've got one of the most well-known haunted house experiences in West Virginia. Well, outside of the theme parks. Back in 2022, there was a news station that interviewed TikTok famous ghost hunter, Kalani Ghost Hunter, after he visited the asylum, and he's like, yeah, even if you don't believe in the paranormal, apparently this place is super creepy. Also, it's pretty cool with architecture, cause it is considered the largest hand-cut masonry building in North America. But still, that many ghosts? I don't know if I want to go there or if I want to avoid it. Uploaded on September 1st, so just recently, this next footage was apparently caught on a surveillance camera directed at the corridor outside a public housing site. So if we look in the background, you can see a public bus. We loved public transport. And the video, which apparently showed a Friday 10 p.m.'s timestamp indicating it is a real-time recording, well, it gives us a clear view of the dim corridor devoid of any activity at night. The caption of the video says that their parcel was delivered, and then they checked, but like the parcel's not there. So then they watched the CCTV playback, and they're like, oh, what's going on? And then the in-video caption added, please tell me it isn't just me seeing things. So as the video continues to play, strange things begin to get captured on camera. So at first, the package that was apparently delivered and left on top of a stack of recycling boxes and shoe rack suddenly fell to the ground without any reason. And then within seconds, a shadowy figure materialized, even though it was barely noticeable. Its shape could be faintly made out, but only when it moved, and it contrasted with the white wall along the corridor. So when the video is slowed down, it appears to be an apparition of sorts. But as soon as it materializes, it disappears. So after the footage appeared to distort on screen for a split second, the package on the ground zipped away from the camera, like it had a life of its own. And then the video ends. And also the account that posted the video didn't give us any other information. So, good package, good mail. Driving down an empty road at night can be creepy enough as it is. The last thing you need is a supernatural element added into the equation. But hey, who's gonna tell a ghost what to do? So one poor woman from Fresno was forced to deal with it when she appeared to have a ghostly sighting on January 22nd. Thankfully, she's got the footage, so everybody, including me, you, whoever else, we get to comment on it. So she shared the video after seeing the ghost while on her drive home from Table Mountain Casino, and she recorded it because, well, there was fog patches on the road. If you get into an accident, you want the insurance. As the car made its way around a long bend, what looked like a transparent figure suddenly appeared in the middle of the road and took a few steps towards the other lane. But then just as quickly as it appeared, the ghostly figure disappeared once again into the night as the car continued to approach. So the caption on the video reads, "Y'all see that?" The sighting took place at approximately 8:50 p.m. along Friant Road. Turns out it's a road that's been the site of numerous fatal accidents over the years. Just last year, a woman died after her car collided with a tow truck at around 1 a.m. at that crazy intersection. Also last year, a 50-year-old doctor and his wife died after crashing into a tree. So according to experts, legend suggests that the ghost of a former police officer patrols the road and pulls over cars to warn them about potential accidents. Because turns out, this officer is believed to have died on a stretch of the road in a car crash. So after people saw the footage of this latest ghostly sighting online, they had opinions. Somebody was like, yeah, that's definitely a ghost. And then somebody else was like, yeah, I've seen and heard many ghosts on that road. But then you've got the skeptics, because we gotta have some skeptics today. Somebody was like, oh, that's just dust kicked up by a breeze, or an oncoming car light reflecting fog. Look, some folks think the footage might even be edited, but like, whatever the explanation for the footage, it definitely serves as a good reminder to, hey, be careful when you're driving. Just keep an eye out. Use your eyes, folks. Life after death is one of these several mysteries that have consistently generated human curiosity for like generations. Some believe in the existence of the soul after death, while others think that the soul of a dead family member wanders around, near and dear for a few days, even though there's no scientific proof. I believe it. I've had signs. CCTV footage from Michigan back in May created a stir on social media. Why? Well, we could see a ghostly figure appearing to be hovering over and staring at a sleeping person. So according to the report, a mysterious figure was captured on one of the security cameras of John Kripke, a Michigan resident, at his 100-year-old farmhouse. And the incident occurred a month following the death of the sleeping human grandfather. So the scary picture features a ghostly figure hovering over the youngest son, who's asleep on the floor. Now the figure was only captured by one of the cameras installed in the house, one that only takes snapshots instead of recording video. So Kripke shared the image on Facebook, and he's like, I don't know what I got. Literally said, I'm not sure what this is, but one of my inside cameras picked it up. Unfortunately, the inside system does not go into video mode, just snapshots of movement and sound. And to their knowledge, they've never been contacted from the other side or had any strange things happen to them in their house. But they live in a 100-year-old farmhouse, and they're like, yeah, I thought this was interesting. So once again, it hit the Facebook group, Ghost Caught on Camera, and folks have opinions. And mixed opinions at that. Well, a lot of folks believe it to be a spirit. Somebody else is like, maybe it's just a smudge on the camera. And other folks are like, maybe just get out of town. One of the users wrote that he looks like a gentleman, seeing as he's wearing a cap, and it seems like he is looking at the sun. They literally said, it looks like a gentleman, you can see the outline of his body, head, shoulders, arms, and he's wearing a hat. Another user thought it to be an elderly woman because of the kind of coat the spirit is wearing. And then somebody else was like, look, the face is so blurred, nothing is clear, what can you know?
The Smurl family haunting. Now imagine being yanked awake in the middle of the night, not by a sound, but by the hand that isn't actually there. Fingers digging into your arm, leaving bruises that seem to burn into your skin. That was the reality of Jack and Janet Smurl in Pennsylvania during the 1980s, when their quiet family home transformed into a stage for one of the most disturbing possession cases ever reported. The Smurls moved into their duplex in 1974, hoping for a fresh start. At first, the disturbances were very subtle. Tools vanished from Jack's workbench, a strange odor, something like rotting garbage mixed with sulfur filled the air, but vanished as quickly as it came. Now soon, scratching noises began echoing through the walls at night. At first, they dismissed it as just plumbing, or maybe rodents even, but then the attacks escalated. The family reported that their German Shepherd was thrown against the wall by an invisible force. Loud guttural growls came from empty rooms. Most chilling of all, Jack himself claimed he was actually attacked in his bed. Scratches and bruises appeared across his body overnight. Janet described being basically by unseen hands while she was basically prayed. Now, the Warrens, the famous paranormal investigators, were brought in after multiple failed attempts at cleansing the house. Ed Warren reported seeing a black, shapeless mass that moved with intelligence, shifting through the walls and flickering out of sight. Lorraine Warren, a self-described clairvoyant, said the house was infested infested with a powerful demonic presence. Even the Catholic Church became involved, but 2 separate exorcisms failed. Neighbors reported hearing screams echoing through the home when no one was inside. Visitors were attacked, scratched, and shoved. The Smurls eventually abandoned the property, but their torment followed them. The family's case became so notorious, it inspired books, interviews, and eventually even a Hollywood retelling. The scariest part? Well, many locals still believe the house carries a curse long after the family moved away. The Enfield Poltergeist. Now, what would you do if your 11-year-old daughter floated off her bed in the dead of night? For Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 in Enfield, London, this wasn't a question. It was her life. Now, in August 1977, Peggy heard her daughter screaming. When she entered their bedroom, she froze. Furniture was sliding across the floor without anyone touching it. A heavy chest of drawers moved towards the door as if trying to trap the children inside. Peggy rushed forward, pushed with all her strength, but said it was like fighting against another person. What began as knocking and scraping soon turned into full-scale terror. Toys flew through the air, chairs slid across the room. Janet, only 11 years old, was repeatedly hurled from her bed as if tossed by invisible hands. Neighbors, police officers, and eventually reporters witnessed it firsthand. One officer actually signed an affidavit stating she had seen a chair move across the floor by itself. Even more disturbing were the voices. Investigators captured recordings of Janet speaking in a very deep, gravely voice that sounded like a grown man. I mean, the voice identified itself as Bill, a man who claimed he had passed away in the house years before. The Hodgsons insisted their daughter could not fake such, guttural tones, especially for hours at a time. Now, skeptics argued the children may have faked parts of the haunting, and indeed, Janet later admitted to exaggerating some events, but many moments had dozens of credible witnesses. The case attracted worldwide attention, becoming one of the most famous possessions and poltergeist incidents ever recorded. Whether it was a hoax or horror, the Enfield case remains chilling because of how much it was documented. Photographs showed Janet literally mid-air, apparently levitating. Audio recordings of the demonic voices still exist to this day. I mean, this wasn't just whispers in the dark. This was a possession broadcast to the world. The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Now, in the late 1940s, a teenage boy in Maryland became the unwilling inspiration for one of the most terrifying movies of all time, known as Roland Doe. Now, his story would later inspire The Exorcist. But the reality behind the film is even darker. It began with scratching noises in the walls, then objects moving on their own. Now, Roland's family was deeply religious, and when his aunt introduced him to a Ouija board, things spiraled. After her sudden passing, Roland began displaying very violent mood swings. His bed shook violently as if someone was trying to throw him out of it. Scratches appeared on his chest, forming words like hell and evil. Now, priests were called, of course, and what they documented remains disturbing. Roland would snarl in voices that wasn't his own. He threw priests across the room with very unnatural strength. During one session, he actually tore a bed spring from his mattress and used it to slash a priest's arm wide open. Multiple exorcisms were attempted over several months. Witnesses reported the boy screaming Latin phrases that he had never learned. When holy water touched his skin, blistering welts appeared. I mean, the final ritual ended when Roland suddenly kind of cried out that Satan was gone. Afterward, the boy lived a normal life and rarely spoke of what happened. What makes this story so haunting, though, is that dozens of written records exist from priests and witnesses. This wasn't just folklore, it was a case taken seriously by the Catholic Church. Whether Roland was possessed or suffering psychological trauma, something deeply disturbing definitely happened in that home. The Tanacu exorcism. Now, in 2005, a young Romanian nun named Irina Cornisi began hearing voices. Now, fellow nuns claimed she was possessed, while others later argued she suffered from schizophrenia. But instead of receiving, medical treatment, she was subjected to a ritual that shocked the world. At the Tanacu monastery, Father Daniel Corganot believed he was battling demons. He and 4 other nuns bound Irina to a wooden cross, gagged her with a towel, and left her without food or water for days while praying over her. Witnesses claim she screamed, begged for release, and then fell unnaturally silent. By the time she was untied, Irina was passed away. The official autopsy blamed adrenaline injections and neglect, but locals whispered that she had indeed been possessed and that the exorcism either freed her or unalived her. Now, the case drew worldwide outrage, of course. Father Daniel was sentenced actually to 7 years in prison. The monastery was shut down completely, yet villagers continued to defend him, insisting that, he had actually tried to save Irina from demonic forces. To this day, many Romanians remain very divided. I mean, was she a victim of just mental illness that got no treatment? Was she a victim of religious extremism? Or was she a victim of a genuine possession gone horribly wrong? The Tanacu exorcism is terrifying because it honestly does blur the line between faith and fear, and it leaves us with a very chilling reminder. What humans do in the name of God is just as terrifying as any demon. The Ammons haunting in the demon house. Now, in 2011, a small house on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, became the center of one of the most chilling possession cases of modern times. LaToya Ammons and her 3 children moved in. And honestly, from the start, the house seemed completely wrong. I mean, in the dead of winter, black flies swarmed the porch, which is weird. Doors creaked open on their own. Very heavy footsteps echoed from the basement when no one was even there. I mean, then the children began acting very strange. One son spoke in a voice that wasn't his own, his eyes literally rolling back until only the white part of his eyes were visible. Another child was reported to have levitated during a sleepover, which was witnessed by friends who fled in terror, of course. Social workers and police officers later claimed to actually see very disturbing phenomena themselves. I mean, a medical professional even reported seeing one of the boys walk backwards up a wall in the hospital. I mean, flipping over his grandmother before landing back on his feet. Nurses screamed and they fled the room, rightfully so. I mean, the case was investigated by local authorities, documented in hundreds of official pages of police reports and medical notes. Eventually, the family just fled, unable to endure the torment any longer, which is fair. The house itself became infamous, nicknamed the Demon House. Paranormal investigator Zach Bagans later purchased the property and he filmed a documentary inside and then had it demolished, claiming it was too dangerous to remain standing. The case is horrifying because of how many professionals, cops, doctors, social workers put their names on the record, swearing they had seen things science just simply could not explain. To this day, the Demon House remains one of the most compelling modern possession cases ever reported.
We begin with the Blair Witch Project.
We're doing a documentary about the Blair Witch. Oh, have you heard of the Blair Witch?
Oh yeah, that's an old story.
We can't kick off a found footage horror movie without including the one that started it all. Released in 1999, the Blair Witch Project utilized found footage so effectively that people truly believed what they were seeing was really documentary footage. The movie follows 3 students, Heather, Michael, and Joshua, who hike into a Maryland forest in 1994 to film a documentary about the Blair Witch, a myth that has supposedly terrified locals for years. However, over the course of the 81-minute Fright Fest, strange things begin to happen, whether it be finding stick figures outside their tents or their belongings rifled through, or even one of them missing in the dead of night. The friends film their relentless ordeals in the woods, and we experience anguish alongside them as their one source of safety is removed from them, their map. They are well and truly lost, and Joshua is missing, somewhere in the woods. Is it the Blair Witch, or something even darker and more sinister? I have to say, the first time I watched the Blair Witch Project, I was paralyzed in fear at the final frame of the movie. For a movie with such a small budget and only 3 characters for the majority of the film, it is so effective at delivering horrors and making you feel just as trapped as the 3 students. For any horror movie lover, this should always be a first on your list, and if you haven't seen it yet, I am very disappointed. Before we continue, let me know below what your favorite found footage horror movie is, and maybe give this video a like once you're down there. Next up, we have The Visit. Here I come. While most are 50-50 about M. Night Shyamalan and his delivery of effective twists and turns, this man does have my heart, and I will argue that The Visit is one of the most horrifying movies to date. This 2015 horror movie follows siblings Becca and Tyler, who are visiting their grandparents on their farm for the first time. Like all horrors, things begin normal at first, but soon descend into madness and chaos as the grandparents start acting very, very strangely. Determined to figure out what is going on, Becca and Tyler try to unravel the mystery by recording the strange events, some of which include the grandmother
projectile vomiting, screaming into the camera and chasing the siblings under the foundation of the house in one of the most chilling and heart-racing scenes in the entire movie. The visit feels like there is reality behind it. How many of us haven't met our relatives? And if you did, you would trust them, right? They're family after all. The visit feels a little too real with how it documents these kids meeting their grandparents for the first time, and the sinking feeling they feel when things begin to grow increasingly and increasingly more sinister while being trapped on a farm with essentially strangers. Can you trust them? As M. Night Shyamalan loves to do, there are of course countless twists and turns to float your boat, and this movie doesn't neglect that, with it having perhaps one of my favourite twists in a found footage horror movie. The Visit successfully reinvents a saturated subgenre so effectively it feels like it was being done for the very first time. If you haven't yet watched it, you absolutely should, and if you didn't like it, you're wrong. Moving on, we have As Above, So Below.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
In my opinion, this is the most underrated movie on our entire list. When I discuss my love for this movie, I'm either met with disgust or people being confused about what the hell I'm talking about. This managed to fly under the radar, but for those who haven't seen it, it's a love or hate kind of movie. Released in 2014, this found footage horror gem takes place in the Paris Catacombs, which is utterly terrifying. It follows a documentary crew as they explore the catacombs in hopes of finding the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance discovered by Nicholas Flamel, which is said to grant immortality and turn metals into gold. Not bad. This all may sound familiar to you if you have seen the first Harry Potter movie, but trust me when I say this movie is wildly different. The movie in essence is based on the 9 circles of hell from the poem Divine Comedy. The film primarily focused on Scarlet Marlowe, a sort of knockoff Lara Croft, but in a good way, follows her deceased father's clues as she delves deeper into the catacombs, following unmarked routes and facing challenges and terrifying occurrences. The remains of the lost aren't the only thing haunting the team, but also their own personal demons that they must conquer in order to escape. The real horrors of this movie lies in reality as we witness the characters work their way through their own inner demons and become absolved, and in some cases found guilty of their sins. As Above, So Below is a mind-bending horror because you're never quite sure what you're witnessing is real or fake. Did a man just get sucked into a burning car in the depths of the catacombs? And are people in fact performing a satanic ritual? Or is this all in the minds of the characters who are slowly losing their way? It is a movie that's so incredibly smart and often flies right over people's heads. It explores themes of greed and obsession as well as touching on spiritual motifs. Sometimes you have to wonder if chasing something forbidden is worth the cost, because the cost just might be your life in As Above, So Below. Up next we have VHS.
Which one is it?
I don't know, man. Let's just
Look at these, okay?
The VHS series as a whole is excellent, particularly 1 and 2, but in this instance I'm going to strictly be discussing the first movie in the series. Released in 2012, VHS is an anthology found footage horror and is compiled of a series of interconnected shorts written by various horror directors including Adam Wingard, Ty West and David Bruckner. The connecting story follows a group of criminals hired to break into a home. However, inside they discover a collection of VHS tapes, all containing something terrifying and disturbing. From a group of friends on a paranormal investigation encountering a demon to a man with a camera recording a supernatural force, the contents of these tapes are truly horrifying. However, the standout story in the movie has to be Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner. The segment follows 3 friends who rent out a motel room and intend on bringing a woman back to record their exploits. However, things don't turn out the way they intend for the best, as the woman they select might not be human at all. Without spoiling too much, the climax of this short is truly terrifying, also unbelievably rewarding for those who weren't rooting for the 3 friends, aka me. Combining found footage with anthology is a big feat, and VHS does it incredibly well. Finally, we have Wreck. This is not only one of my favorite found footage horror movies, but one of my favorite horror movies, period. Now, this movie should not be confused with its American counterpart, Quarantine. I understand wanting to bring this movie to a broader audience, but I will always push for people to watch the original Spanish version, as it is far superior and terrifying, in my opinion anyway. Released in 2007, this Spanish found footage horror Wreck, short for record, tells the story of a reporter and her cameraman, who are documenting and following firefighters. While things begin as normal, the firefighters soon get a call to an apartment building where a woman is trapped in her apartment. However, something sinister is happening inside. The woman displays aggression and begins to attack the firefighters, unbeknownst to them, spreading a terrifying infection that sweeps its way throughout the building, and no one is safe. Thankfully, we have the cameraman recording everything for our entertainment. The building is ultimately placed in a lockdown with no one coming in or out, with the reporter trapped inside documenting the entire thing. However, the infection isn't the only thing being housed inside the building. Something is inside the penthouse suite, and whether she wants to or not, our reporter is about to uncover the truth in the dark confines of the apartment. The final few moments of this movie are some of the most unsettling and chilling moments in any horror movie. The visual effects are unbelievably impressive for the budget, and the acting is truly superior. Will the reporter be able to uncover the truth of what is going on, and more importantly, will she escape the infection zone? What makes this movie feel so real and authentic is that it follows everyday life and forces you to doubt whether you are safe inside of your apartment building. Do you know your neighbor? Maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Maybe you've heard screaming down the hall. Rec makes you believe anything is possible inside the confines of this apartment building, and the lockdown protocol is so believable it might just make you want to live in a house. You should absolutely give this movie a watch and let us know your thoughts below, because this one is a personal favorite of mine and I will not stop talking about it.
Number 5. I Want a Toy. Coming up first on our list today is going to be this creepy VHS tape uploaded to YouTube, I Want a Toy.mp4. It's been circulating around the net for a bit, and maybe you've actually seen it before if you've got your nose to the grindstone vis-a-vis scary videos like yours truly. This video was uploaded to a channel called Baddington and is said to have been discovered on a lost VHS tape and has left people with a real uneasy feeling in their stomach afterwards, and not just from watching all that static. The video itself, it's only about 5 minutes long, but those 5 minutes are more than enough to make your skin crawl and your hair stand on end. I'm burpy. The footage is grainy and distorted, making it difficult to discern what exactly it is you're even watching. It feels like a staticky nightmare, like something you kind of remember but can't quite focus on. It's like a recording of a TV show you've never heard of or seen before, aimed at what looks like preschoolers or kindergartners. There's a puppet that looks like he's probably pretty good friends with Annabelle and the puppet from Saw, and he's sitting singing his lovely, horrifying rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star for You. Horrifying puppets and slowed down scary nursery rhymes. Is there a better combination in scary videos? If that wasn't enough for you though, things get a lot worse when our scary puppet friend seems to start degrading as the quality of the video degrades. His eyes vanish, and the camera cuts to our little wooden pal saying how badly he wants a toy. He's been a good boy. I don't know. I gotta be honest, Haunted Puppet, I'll see what I can do, but I can't guarantee nothing. It might be best to keep a bit of distance between us, you and I. Now, if you enjoyed this kind of stuff, and I definitely do, that's why I made a list of it, I definitely recommend you toss Baddington a subscribe. They're a very good content creator. If you like content like this, there is a lot of haunted VHS stuff on that channel. But if you're looking for more than haunted VHS stuff, analog or digital, Top 5 Scary has it all. From stories of hauntings, Halloween movies, cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, and more, we've got a little something to scare everybody. So hit subscribe and that bell and don't miss a single scream. But take it slow, okay? Make sure you watch the rest of this video. Number 4, grave robbing for morons. Do you wish you had a few extra bucks? A little side hustle to help you make a few dollars in between checks in these trying times? I know I do. Maybe you just need a hobby that can also make you a little money on the side, a little passive income. Maybe something fun like selling old clothes on Depop, or I don't know, something outdoorsy like grave robbing. Luckily, there's an instructional video you have just got to see. That's our next entry, grave robbing for morons. The video itself is a how-to guide for individuals interested in grave robbing. It provides step-by-step instructions on how to locate and dig up graves, as well as helpful little tips for avoiding detection by the authorities. Now, the video does kind of seem like it might be a joke. It's presented kind of humorous, you know, there's some funny graphics and sarcastic commentary. People for a long time have wondered if the video is real, if this guy's really confessing to a criminal act, or if he's just doing a joke in poor taste. Grave robbing is definitely pretty illegal illegal, but it's also one of those things that's considered like, I don't know, highly immoral, blasphemous, if that's your sort of thing. It's fine to grave rob if you're in like a video game and you're taking Viking gold out of an old crypt, but it's a little bit different when you're cracking open coffins in real life, I would say. Now, some people argue that the video it's just a work of satire, it's just a joke, and you shouldn't put too much stock into a weird video uploaded to YouTube, and that the video might just be a commentary on the whole absurdity of grave robbing as a whole, and this is to discourage people from engaging in the practice. Regardless of whether or not you think it's real or not, it's definitely got a lot of us talking, so it's definitely a videotape that maybe none of us should have watched. Some people believe it should be banned, while others believe it should be protected. That's all I gotta say about that. Number 3, the Paris Catacombs. The Paris Catacombs really don't need any help being scary. It's a tunnel filled with the remains of hundreds of dead bodies and more bones hanging up than a museum, so even a well-lit guided tour with a stop for some coffee and fancy snacks would probably still leave you a little bit unnerved and scared with just a dash of heebies and jeebies. Oh, if only a nice walk through the catacombs was what I was showing you. Instead, I've got a terrifying video of someone running around the catacombs like they're a first-person horror game. Now, why is someone running through the catacombs? Are they running from something that's behind them? Running in the world's worst marathon? Are they just scared because they're lost and they're desperately trying to find their way to the exit? The camera gets a lot shakier as the video keeps going, and the person seems like they're running faster and faster and getting more and more stressed and scared as they try to find their way out of the never-ending, wet, dark, dank annals of the tunnels below. At the end of the video, the camera drops and footsteps are all you can hear. So we have no idea what happened to our first-person view recording. Now, someone in the comments pointed out that something to keep in mind is that even just on the map presented of the catacombs, you can go from one side of the catacombs all the way to the other. Now, a lot of the public tour is blocked off, but there are spots where you can leave the path and wander into the depths of the catacombs, and they do not advise you to do this. In fact, they would rather prefer that you do not. You can get yourself really lost. Parisian police seal every entrance they find that isn't supposed to be on the tour, which means potentially you could go into one entrance, come back and find yourself in a sealed entrance, and you can do this for miles and miles. Explorers who are familiar with the catacombs say that the depths aren't even slightly mapped out. So there are miles and miles of just unknown catacomb out there. There are ways down no one knows and paths that could lead who knows where. Just hope you're not claustrophobic. Claustrophobic. Number 2, Candle Cove. If you're really tuned into internet horror and creepy campfire stories for a digital age, then perhaps you've come across Candle Cove before. This freaky story in particular actually scared me to my core when I was younger, like really chilled my bones. So it feels very appropriate if I can traumatize a new generation. I love to give back. What can I say? I love to keep the cycle. The legend goes that Candle Cove was a TV show for younger audiences about pirates, my favorite subject, filmed as a puppet show like something like the Thunderbirds. It first popped up on a forum for nostalgic TV, where someone asked if anybody remembered this old show Candle Cove. Tons of users came out of the woodwork to share their stories and happy memories of this silly little show. It was like a group effort, everybody tossing in what little bits of trivia they remembered. But people were frustrated that it was hard to find any footage or like DVD recordings of the show. Well, someone uploaded a clip of Candle Cove and it is pretty darn unsettling. As I've already mentioned, puppets are inherently terrifying, and then you mix in some VHS artifacts, scratching and screaming, and something that's supposed to be innocent turns into a horror show real quick. A lot of the details about the show sound like it was way too scary for its young audience. There's a character named Skin Taker, a skeleton pirate wearing skin, or an episode that was just the puppets shaking and screaming into the camera. Now, where the legend of Candle Cove gets downright horrifying and freaky is that someone in the original forum thread where it was first discovered returned to the post, saying that he met up with his parents and he had asked if they knew anything about Candle Cove or remembered how much he used to love that show. And he was told by his mother she was always confused whenever he would talk about that pirate puppet show, since whenever he'd say he was watching it, he was just sitting by the TV watching static. Oh, still to this day sends a little chill up my spine. They eventually actually adapted the story of Candle Cove into a TV show. I can't remember what the name of it's called, so I probably shouldn't even have included this fucking right now. Maybe done some research. Got all of that. I am who I am. Number 1, Skinamarink-a-dink-a-dink. This next one is short and sweet and also came out of Baddington's channel. 2 shoutouts in one video. Wow, we're gonna have to cut this guy a check. Well, when you're making some of the best scary VHS content out on the web, you can expect more than 1 shoutout in a video. This video is very short but spooky. Inspired by the sleeper indie horror hit Skinamarink, this short video focuses in on an animatronic bear, one that I'm sure fans of indie horror PC games will instantly recognize. Much like the movie Skinamarink, the clip really lets the tension and horror build up before unleashing a torrent of jump scares on you, and then fading out on a blurry, out of focus image of the bear from before, lingering on you and staring right into your soul. And I don't know when else I'll get a public platform for this, but please watch Skinamarink if you like this sort of thing. If you like spooky VHS horror, that's literally what the whole movie is, and it's a Canadian indie horror movie, so by Canadian content regulations, I have to mention it. Number 6, the bonus haunted video. I know, a 6th entry on top 5 scary? What is he doing? He's letting the power go to his head. I know this is top 5, but I found a 6th one and it was just too good not to include. The story about it was amazing, the footage itself is horrifying, and I think you'll agree with me for including it. If you found a videotape that had a mysterious blank label reading "surprise," would you watch it? I feel like a lifetime of studying horror films has prepared me to know better than to do anything so stupid. Well, in 2018, a software engineer named Foon Turing discovered a mysterious VHS tape in a charity shop in Milpitas, California. The tape looked old, definitely a few decades at least, with a worn out sticker on the front reading "surprise" and a smiley face, looking like a prop out of a horror movie. It looked like the thing that has the girl from The Ring on it. Most of us probably would have chucked that into a dumpster and set it on fire, but Foon is braver than most of us, took the tape home and popped it into an old VHS player. We got the footage, and I'm gonna warn you, there's a reason I saved this for the end. Please don't write the channel and complain if this was too much for you. It's pretty disturbing. I'm sorry, I hope that wasn't too much, and I hope you're not let down. I would never let you down or run around and desert you.
Dear Zachary is a good one to start out with, since it's a doozy and a half. The full title is Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father, and it's a 2008 American film written, produced, directed, edited, filmed, and scored by Kurt Quinn. Yep, he did everything. It's about Kurt's close friend, Andrew Bagby, who was killed after ending a relationship with a woman named Shirley Jean Turner. Now, she was arrested as a suspect, and shortly thereafter announced she was pregnant with Andrew's offspring, a boy she named Zachary. So Kurt was like, okay, I want to make a video for Zachary about how his dad, because he wants Zachary to know just how great of a man his dad was. And the drama that unfolds while he's making this movie is insane. Like, it's real. It isn't really like true crime, like it's just visceral. Yes, there's parts that are heartwarming, but a lot of it is heartbreaking. And the filmmaker had no idea most of the content of this movie was going to happen. Like, this is only something you can really watch if you're in like an okay emotional state. Because the worst part about it, spoiler alert, the son ends up being killed by the mother right before she takes her own life. Look, I did mention this was dark and awful, right? Ergo why I wanted to get it out of the way first. So in 2009, after watching the film, Canadian MP Scott Andrews introduced Bill C-464, also known as Zachary's Bill, to the Parliament of Canada, and it helps protect young descendants in relation to bail hearings, custody disputes, and it was signed into the law the following year. So yes, while some good came out of this mess, it's still just so awful. House LLC takes place in the aftermath of a haunted house attraction going badly wrong, leaving over a dozen people dead and the police and press with a lot of questions. Years later, the makers of a documentary about the tragedy meet with Sarah, the only known survivor of the team behind Hell House, and she gives them never-before-seen footage detailing to the build-up that fateful night and what really happened. Look, I'm a scare actor myself, so I loved every minute of watching this film. It hits all the right notes. It's incredibly creepy, it has a consistent feel and pace throughout, and it has good actors in all the main roles. The documentary format lends an air of realism to the story, and it is very well done. Like, it does such an effective job of blurring the lines that a lot of viewers wondered, was there a real Abaddon Hotel tragedy true story? And while it does a great job seeding in the lore of the tragedy, Hell House is not based on a real story. The filmmakers filmed this movie on location at the Waldorf Estate of Fear House. It's a haunted attraction in Layton, Pennsylvania. For a decade, the Poughkeepsie Tapes was stuff of legend. It was a type of movie that's only found in like a creepypasta. So if you believe the rumors, this documentary about a serial killer terrorizing Poughkeepsie, New York, used real footage of that man attacking, harming, and killing his victims. Obviously, it isn't the case since it's a completely fictional film about a made-up serial killer, but that hasn't kept the film from holding on to its true story legacy. So the movie opens with the discovery of the tapes themselves. After uncovering 10 bodies in a residential backyard, the police unearthed something far more menacing. Over 800 tapes from the killer, each detailing his heinous exploits. Composed of this found footage, interviews with experts, and one victim's testimony, the movie pieces together the story of the Water Street Butcher. Now, it's kind of a hard flick to watch, and it's best accompanied by a couple of trigger warnings. The eerie mimicry of early 2000s true crime shows like Forensic Files and Unsolved Mysteries is very convincing, making it difficult not to get sucked into the reality of it all. Like even today, people are tricked into believing that the footage from the tapes is real, despite, the obvious pointing to the contrary. The claim to reality is a constant source of controversy for the film, as is its deeply unsettling content. But the thing that stands out most in complaints is that it wasn't the movie that people preemptively decided it should be. So it premiered in 2007 at the Tribeca Film Festival, where it was quickly snatched up by MGM for distribution. They marketed the movie heavily, but it would all prove a huge waste of money when the film mysteriously vanished from the studio's 2008 release schedule. Though you could find the movie at the time through less than legal means, it didn't get a wide release until it hit video on demand in 2014. Apparently, MGM thought they should be making more money off this venture, and then they pulled it for a never-to-be-seen theatrical release. Okay, finally, 2017, Shout Factory released the movie on DVD and Blu-ray. Just more proof of the value of physical media. So for many of those early viewers, the fun of the mystery was the mystery. Is the footage real? Why did MGM pull it? Was it banned for being too extreme? This and a plethora, if you will, of other questions swirled around online forums in the time from those early trailers to the movie's eventual home release. Yes, the killer's tapes in the movie are graphic, but not in the way people expect. A lot of the violence is off-screen, it's implied or described, but never shown outright, and it forces the audience to imagine the most disturbing moment. Spoiler alert, in what's called the scariest scene in the movie, the killer, posing as a police officer, picks up a hitchhiking woman looking for a ride to the nearest gas station. And when he drives past the station, the woman's face falls into an expression of absolute dread, because she realizes it's no police officer. And over the next 6 minutes, the audience is forced to watch as she hopelessly pleads for her life. If that doesn't terrify you, damn, I wish. Alrighty, next up we have a movie that's so heinous, I'm not even supposed to be talking about it. Actually, I can't even say its title, but let's call it the people-eating mass extinction event of the 1930s. And it's been highly regarded as the first real big found footage movie of all time. Ergo, I wasn't going to leave it off today's list. This flick from director Ruggero Deodato wasn't his first movie about people eating, but it was definitely the one that got the most flack from the media. He'd been making films since the 1960s, and he had this trademark style. Flashy, grimy pictures with a hardened edge and plenty of coitus and violence. He was one of many Italian directors who facilitated the people-eating boom of the late 70s, and he'd already made one such film, The Last C-Word World, before he got around to this one. So, despite his sensationalist style, he'd already proven himself not only a very competent director, but one with depth and ideas worthy of cinematic examination. So this is the story of a professor journeying to the Amazon to discover what happens to a film crew of missing brave young Americans, only to realize that this characterization couldn't have been further from the truth. From the offset, this movie looks at how the mass media portrays its fellow Americans, the marginalization of those outside the land of the free, and what it means to be civilized. The young filmmakers are immediately positioned by the media as victims of local savagery, and when anthropologist Dr. Monroe is set to find them, it is only through his embracing of the local people that he comes across the lost film reels that's gonna piece this whole puzzle together. Broadcasting executives back in New York are foaming at the mouth at the prospect of a new documentary, even more sensational than the crew's previous works, and they're so focused on sensation and viewing figures that the sizzle reel they show includes, the gang forcibly amputating the leg of their guide literal seconds after he suffers a snake bite. And that's about all I can talk about in detail because, I don't want to get in trouble. As is the case with a lot of old school exploitation flicks, the reels were seized. Why? They were, obscene. But then something crazy happened. Those same reels became evidence in criminal proceedings. This wasn't just a plain old, too devious for public consumption theatrical release. People thought this was a snuff film. And apparently the weirdos who made it were so brazen in their criminality that they were going to throw this big premiere. So the director was brought up on killing charges and was actually forced to bring his actors in for interviews to prove they were still alive, and then demonstrated how they performed some of the special effects. Thankfully, eventually those charges were dismissed. And perhaps slightly more in keeping with Italy's progressive artistic reputation, the courts eventually overturned the movie's ban several years later. But by this point, the director and several of his associates had suffered considerable legal troubles, and countries around the world were banning it, or at the very least censoring it heavily.